So we're now going to start talking about some of the key operations, or operators as they're called, in the Flux class. And we're going to start by talking about factory methods. And the reason we talk about factory methods is we've got to find a way to get a flux created, and factory methods are the means by which we do that. And of course, hopefully you're familiar with the factory method pattern from the Gang of Four book. This is a variant of that pattern that is used to create fluxes, usually from non-reactive types, which I'll explain in a second. And we're going to take a look at 4 operators in Flux that make a flux from something else: just, fromArray, fromIterable, and from. So let's take a look at the just operator first. Just creates a flux that emits the given element or elements, because they're usually more than one, and then completes, which means it sends the onComplete hook method call up the stream. The parameters that are given are the elements to emit. And you can see this is using a vararg syntax. Vararg basically just means any or 0 or more of stuff. Now, you should definitely give 1, otherwise it would be pointless. But you can give 1, 2, 3, 4, and various parameters to the just method. What just returns is a new flux that is captured at instantiation time. In other words, it's eager. It's like your dog that is so excited to see you and he can't wait to spend time with you. That's eager. And we'll talk more about that in a second. Fluxes can emit multiple elements, as many as you provide them in the parameter list, unlike monos, which have a just operator that only emits 1 element, because monos work with 1, as the name mono may imply. This factory method, just, is used most commonly to adapt so-called non-reactive input sources into the reactive model. What the heck does that mean? Well, here we're going to use the just operator to create a flux of 4 big fraction operators. And you can see the big fraction operators are given here. These are non-reactive types. A big fraction is not a reactive type. So if we want to work on it reactively, we're going to have to convert it, and just is a factory method that does just that. Now, this goes back to the issue of when is it evaluated eagerly. It's evaluated at assembly time. And what that means is this code here will always run in whatever thread is used to create the flux. Now, you might say, why wouldn't that always be the case? We'll see later that there's good reasons for that. And we'll see that there's also a couple other factory method operators we're about to talk about called fromIterable and fromArray that also evaluate eagerly at assembly time. That's a sort of compile time, launch time kind of thing. Now, there's also similar mechanisms available in RxJava. I won't dwell on them, but they have a method called just that works exactly the same way. Likewise, Java Streams has an of operator that's used to create a stream from a bunch of values. Let's talk about another method, the fromIterable method. This is used to create a flux that emits items contained in a given iterable. What's an iterable, you may ask? Well, an iterable is basically something that implements the iterable interface. And there's a lot of things that implement the iterable interface in Java. So things like lists and sets and other kinds of collections. And here's an example. So here we have a list of integers, and then we can say flux fromIterable and give it a list. And that'll create a flux stream of integer objects from the given list collection. You will need to know how to use fromIterable when we start doing reactive programming in an upcoming version of the programming assignment. But it's super simple. RxJava has something that works the same way, and Java Streams has something very much like this too, where you can take a list, and this is actually baked into Java Streams. You can just say list.stream, and boom, you've got yourself a stream, whereas in Flux and observable in Project Reactor and RxJava, respectively, you have to have this special method called, because lists don't know anything about those reactive programming frameworks. Whereas they've been baked in, the concept of a stream has been baked into Java out of the box nowadays. The next method is called fromArray. Pretty much the same thing. I won't spend a lot of time on this. Instead of taking an iterable, it takes an array of something, and it returns a flux that emits the items from the array. Here's an example. This is very much like we just looked at, except that used an iterable. This on a list, this uses fromArray on an integer array. RxJava has something like that, and Java Streams has something like that too. And there's a couple different ways to do it in Streams. OK, next topic, a little bit different. So notice that just fromArray and fromIterable are all eager. Remember that? That'll probably be a quiz question, by the way. And we're now going to talk about the from operator, which is a little bit different from the ones we've talked about. So from will decorate the specified publisher with the Flux API. And this publisher, this source, provides the source that will be decorated. What the heck does that mean? Well, let's take a look. First of all, let's talk about the properties of from and how it differs from the other three things we talked about: fromArray, fromIterable, and just. From returns a new Flux that decorates its source at runtime, not at assembly time. Very important distinction. So the way to think about it is, unlike the other three examples, which were eager, from is lazy. So from is like that kitten that wants to sleep and play when it feels like. It doesn't want to greet you when you come home. It's busy doing its other thing. By the way, I was watching this funny John Oliver bit the other day, which I should also post. And he showed a video that was created by an AI large language model where it generated a poem, a rap song about cats, and then had the voice of Eminem sing the song. So someone has trained a model to sound like Eminem. They generated a rap song about cats and a video about cats. It was hilarious. And there were pictures somewhat like this in the video. This factory method operator from adapts non-Flux publishers into the Flux API. So what would be an example of this? Well, here's an example where we're going to take a method we'll look at later called makeBigFraction, which is going to make a random big fraction. And we're going to have it generated dynamically. What does that mean? That means, remember, this thing's going to generate a random number. It means that every time this method from is called, it's going to, at runtime, call out to this call. This is a supplier. And so it's going to capture this supplier and then call it at runtime, which will potentially generate a different result every time. Whereas just and fromArray and fromIterable were done at assembly time. So they'll always give you back the same results. Whereas this will give you back potentially different results because it's a random number generator. And from is lazy. So the key thing to remember, it's lazy, and it does this at the time of subscription, which is not the same as the time of assembly. Time of subscription is dynamic. Time of assembly is more static. You can use this particular pattern here, this little technique, as a workaround for Flux's lack of a from callable method. For some reason it escapes me, there's a from callable method in RxJavable's observable and flowable. There is no from callable method in Flux. I don't know why, but if you need the from callable semantics, you can use this little idiom here. RxJava has something called from callable, which is, in my mind, a lot more concise, but you can do the same thing. And there is really no equivalent in Java Streams, as far as I'm aware. OK, so that's the end of the operators in some of the operators in the Flux class that are factory methods. We'll see there's a whole boatload of other ones we'll take a look at in later discussions.